Hello and welcome to the show that actually has a name now, going by the Very Good Sports Podcast, although that is subject to change based on how this goes. My good friend Justin today. How you
Hello.
doing, man?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Doing very well, ready to talk some basketball for the first time in a long time.
Talking basketball is always therapeutic.
It is, and I need a lot of basketball therapy, so this is a good place to start. All right, so real quickly, just for everyone watching, I'll go over the outline. We're going to start out talking about the Atlanta Hawks' 19-game winning streak, which was conveniently snapped, so we can't talk about it like an active winning streak. Still 19-game winning streak, plenty to talk about. Also, with the Hawks winning streak, we're going to talk about who the best team in the NBA is right now, who could it be, and what it means going forward. Ask Justin about what player he's been surprised by the most this season, or disappointed by. And, of course, the always interesting NBA All-Star rosters and the always disappointing Sacramento Kings. So, Justin, we're going to start out right off with Atlanta Hawks. Obviously, had a 19-game winning streak. Actually went undefeated in January, then lost to kick off February against New Orleans. So, what are your thoughts on just their winning streak and how it happened?
I think it was almost like one of those perfect storms because the Clippers had I believe it was 17-game winning streak a couple years ago, and they actually went like 16-0 in December. And it was like it wasn't so much that they were the best team in the NBA as much as it was everything clicked for a certain amount of time. And but with Atlanta, it's ball movement, it's guard pressure in the backcourt, it's having to pay attention to Kyle Korver coming off screens. It's if you leave Korver, you got DeMarre Carroll in the corner. Their bigs can hit jumpers. Paul Millsap can hit threes. Al Horford can hit corner threes. I think he's like 8 of 20 on corner threes this year. He's a 51% mid-range shooter. Like everything, I mean, they played some bad teams, but they were beating good teams. There's so many reasons to why it worked for them for 19 games, but the simple answer would have to be they are just a really, really good team, and that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a sexy team. You don't have any stars who people go out and vote for in the All-Star game like they do with Kobe. We'll get into that later. But I mean, even at the head coach position, I mean, Mike Budenholzer, he wasn't. I don't think he was a huge, attractive name, but it's just he took the piece of the ad and he's made him work exceptionally well.
Yeah, I know everyone wants to say they're the Spurs East, and they kind of are, but what makes them, in my opinion, more dangerous than the Spurs is they do have two bigs who can step out and hit jumpers. So when they go to their starting lineup has 5 guys who can hit jumpers. So when they spread you out and they run the pick and roll in the middle of the floor, how do your bigs help? Because you can't help off Paul Millsap. And if you help off Al Horford on the baseline, he's going to hit a jumper and you're dead. So it's like you're playing with fire on a nearly possession-by-possession basis, and Schroeder's out there. He brings in the change of pace that, like, Teague's quick, but he doesn't have Schroeder's explosion. So when he comes in, it's a constant chess game, and while you're trying to catch up to the moves they've made, they're 3 moves ahead, and your mind's still trying to wrap itself around the fact that what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned their wins. I mean, they beat Portland, and these are all playoff teams. They beat Portland twice, including on the road. They beat the Clippers, Toronto Raptors. They beat a Memphis Grizzlies team who is stout on defense and just, as you mentioned, jumpers. They can frustrate you. And they beat Chicago, and they beat the Wizards. I mean, sure,
They
there
also
were
beat
some.
Oklahoma City.
And Oklahoma City, yeah.
I mean, I don't think. See, this is the problem: is they beat a lot of West teams. I mean, obviously they're beating East teams, but they beat a lot of West teams. I think because Western Conference teams can't prepare for them like Eastern Conference teams can. Like maybe in the playoffs when a team has 7 games to prepare for and coaching staffs get time to see things and get into film study for a series, maybe certain things won't work as well. But it's also like it's hard not to see it working. Because you do have to respect guys like Kyle Korver. You do have to respect DeMarre Carroll in the corner. He's like 43% from there. I mean, like as a team, they shoot like 43% as a team from three on the corners. And Kyle Korver's a big part of it. He's like 61%. but it's like you have to respect everybody. And that's the problem in the playoffs is in the playoffs teams want to take certain things away offensively, but who do you take away from Atlanta? That's the problem.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point about how being able to strategize against the team changes. And like, I mean, for some of these teams, you're looking at back-to-back games. You're looking at a road trip where you have 3 games in 5 nights, so you don't have time to focus on one team and focus on what they do best and what things you take away.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing, the back-to-back. I mean, obviously a Clipper fan, but we played San Antonio, and then the next night it was, oh, guess what? You have to play Atlanta now. That's like, okay, cool. And it's very tough in a regular season. That's why elite offenses in the regular season thrive more than probably they really are elite. Like they'll put up 110, 108, points per 100 possessions in terms of efficiency, but in the playoffs it'll kind of come down just a little bit because teams know how to handle everything a little bit better from a structural standpoint defensively.
And talking about Atlanta, I mean, obviously, I don't think anyone saw the success coming from them this year. If you had to look at one, you did?
No, I didn't. I had them at like 42 wins because I just factored in like they're getting Al Horford back. They'll get a couple wins from him alone. You didn't. I mean, I didn't factor in Jeff Teague being great, or at least taking another step. Korver's impact on a structure, another year in the Budenholzer system, and it's like they took off in ways I don't think anyone actually saw. Like anyone who says they saw Atlanta being the best team in the East is crazy. They don't believe that. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously their 19-game winning streak helped in a big way. But even before that, they were ripping off big winning streaks and were 22-8.
Yeah, and that's a testament to their system. Like they beat the Clippers twice, as you said, they beat Portland twice. They're going into arenas that these are good home teams, and they're going in there and they're running their system. It's basically like it's almost like to use a football analogy, it's almost like a great running team taking their running game on the road in the playoffs and basically say, we're coming in with our system, you try and stop us, we're not going to worry about what you're doing. And that's what Atlanta does. They're imposing their will and making teams adjust to what they want to do more than they're adjusting to other people. They're forcing opponents' hands to stylistically match up when they can't. Like the Clippers, for instance, had to try to match up with Spencer Hawes a little bit defensively because he provided at least more offense to kind of help them. But he was getting torched defensively because he can't really guard the pick and roll like DeAndre Jordan can. So they get you out of what you want to do. They're still comfortable. You're not.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the system, and this is one of the things about the next question is about who has contributed most to their success. Is it more of a player thing or a situation where Budenholzer has got these players to buy in, he's built the system that works for them? And also, on top of that, is being a former Spurs assistant, is this a thing where people start looking at Greg Popovich's coaching tree as for potential head coaching hires?
Well, I'll answer it in reverse. I don't think it's more of a Popovich thing as much as it is just a Budenholzer thing. Because Vinny Del Negro was a Spurs assistant, and we saw it that way. He didn't really have an offensive system. Avery Johnson was an assistant, I believe, and he didn't. I mean, he had a great year with Dallas, and then kind of fizzled out when people realized he inherited a team that was already great. Yeah. And I think a lot of it, rather than just players, a lot is on Korver because of his ability to move within the system. But a lot of it is everybody collectively. I can't pinpoint a single player, and that's why they got about three All-Stars right now, is because it isn't just one guy. It's not just a Kobe Bryant or even a Blake Griffin and a Chris Paul. It's all these guys, and this is why I've said it on Twitter. They remind me a little bit of the Pistons team that won the title. It was everybody. It was literally everybody. Everybody bought in. Everybody came to play hard every game. Everybody understood their role. No one bickered. Everybody did their job. That is the Atlanta Hawks this year, and that's actually the scary part of it, because you have these other teams, especially the Cavaliers and even the Bulls to a lesser extent with their we're going to build teams with star power, whereas the Hawks built their team, had their system, and then got the players for the system. And that's the biggest difference is they built within the system, and other teams tried to make the players the system. And with Atlanta, I think you're seeing the returns on the system are already very high, and I don't expect it to stop. They are going to be the number one seed in the East. It's not that's already pretty much etched in stone.
I mean, one thing, just going back to Horford, I mean, this is a guy who, I mean, he's now had 2 torn pectoral muscles, which have cost him a lot of time, and still he's come back from both and is playing extremely well.
It's almost unheard of. Like, he tore his pectoral twice, and he's still an elite mid-range shooter. You'd figure he'd have some kind of negative ramifications from the surgeries and the tears and all this stuff, and he'd be a lesser player, but he is what he is, and he's still great. He still impacts everything. And I think it's a testament to what kind of player he really was, and in a way, kind of how underrated he was. Because for years, people kept saying, we need to put a center next to him. He's really a power forward. No, he's really a center. Because him at center, stylistically and schematically, changes everything. Because centers don't want to, like for instance with Marc Gasol, teams don't want to guard centers out to 18, 19 feet. You know, they want to keep their centers in the paint. Kind of like Roy Hibbert did last year, where he was just pretty much in the paint the whole time, protecting the paint. He didn't like coming out to defend. And that's how it is now, is now the Hawks, with Horford's ability to now be healthy and hit the jumpers, he pretty much changes everything. If he were to go out again, a lot of their system would hurt. Where Pero Antic can make threes, he's not Al Horford.
If you were to build an all underrated NBA team, how many Atlanta Hawks players would be on it?
All of them, just all of them, because honestly, no one is ever going to get their due in that system. That's just how it is, and I think it's great, and it's also sad to see because we know how great Horford is before the system, so we've at least seen him. Same with Millsap. Korver, we knew he could always hit jumpers, and threes, but this system makes him something that is almost supernatural. Like, when he comes off a screen and he gets the ball, he's getting triple teamed by three defenders run at him, and everything else opens for everybody.
Yeah, and just talking about, you mentioned Atlanta Hawks is the number 1 seed, so I'm going to go a little bit further. Looking at, and obviously it's early. I mean, we're not even at the All-Star game yet. Is this the team that's going to win the East?
Ooh, is that the team that's going to win the East? I don't know, but I trust them more than any other team in the East. Because even their average games, they're still giving teams problems. Like yesterday, they didn't play well against New Orleans, but that was a really bad game for them. But they still, for somewhat, were in it. At least when the fourth quarter rolled around, they still had a chance. And that's the thing, like, Cleveland's making this run. They've won 11 in a row. But it's like they're still 10.5 back of Atlanta, and they're still the 5 seed. So Cleveland will probably get the 2 seed, but I don't know if they can beat Atlanta. And I think the only team that could beat Atlanta might be someone like a Washington, who can kind of match up with the backcourt with Wall and Beal, and they have Pierce, and they have the front line of Nene and Gortat to match up physically, who can also their bigs can also hit jumpers. So I think it's going to come down to, for Atlanta, it's the wrong matchup could knock them out. And right now, I do think that Atlanta matches up very well with every single team. If there was one thing that I think was missing from Atlanta, maybe it's a true rim protector, but they're getting by right now without it, and you kind of got it. I mean, yeah, they're in the East, but they're still the best team by far. I mean, no one's going to come within probably at least 4 games of them. So, I mean, I think they're up 7 right now on Toronto and Toronto's second. I mean, to be up 7 right now is crazy. The race is over. And in the playoffs, though, I'm kind of rooting for Atlanta. Kind of rooting for Atlanta to make the finals, because that'd actually be kind of a cool story.
I mean, we talked about it earlier. I mean, can you imagine if a scenario where it's the Atlanta Hawks and the Washington Wizards Eastern Conference Finals?
It'd be almost unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think that would be the first Eastern Conference Finals without LeBron James or Dwight Howard since, like, what was it, like 05? I think it was like 05.
Around there, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty remarkable when you really factor it in. I mean,
Yeah.
because you always assume LeBron James, he's going to be at least make the Eastern Conference Finals, and if he doesn't make, and if the Cavaliers don't make it, that's almost like wow, you know. So who knows? I mean, I think the Hawks are there to stay, and depending on matchups, because I think right now the 8th seed is what, Miami, and because like
Uh,
Miami, Charlotte, Brooklyn, Detroit are all in like that 7 to 10 range where they're fighting it out over who can be less terrible. So I I think if Atlanta were to get like Miami, I think they'd easily dispatch Miami, even with Wade and Bosch, just because I don't trust Wade to stay healthy. So that's how I really look at it. And if they get Brooklyn, that's over. Might as well just end the series before it starts.
yeah, Brooklyn. That's an experiment that went badly very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I'm not going to talk about the last game for the Clippers against Brooklyn, but yeah, that experiment did not go well for the Nets. Probably the worst run organization in I almost said professional sports right now, but at least in the major four sports.
And that is amazing considering the other contenders.
Yeah, yeah, because I'd probably put the Buffalo Bills at least would be up there. The Cleveland Browns for the most part. Well, yeah, Cleveland Browns would be up
Yeah.
there, and then obviously your Kings. Sorry, but I mean, I would honestly take those teams for the future over the Nets. I really would. I don't see what the Nets have. I mean, it's Joe Johnson, and I love Joe Johnson, but he's overpaid. Not overrated, just overpaid. Darren Williams is, I don't even know. Brooke Lopez is breaking down. Like when he plays, it's great. Oftentimes he's not. They're just in a bad situation. They give away too many picks for players. Like they don't own their own first round pick until 2019. That's insane. Like this year, they're going to swap with Atlanta because there's no way Atlanta keeps their own pick. They're just going to swap with Brooklyn. And then I think next year Boston actually outright gets their pick. And then 2016 they like swap pick. Like it's crazy. Like the picks they gave up are just insane.
But here's the thing: we were just talking about Atlanta, and now we could be talking about them having a high draft pick.
Yeah, and I think the last team to do that was the Pistons when they drafted Darko. No, for real, because I think that pick for Darko was like it was like payment for a trade that had happened like 7 or 8 years earlier, and it was
Yeah.
from Memphis or Vancouver at the time. I think it was we'll just say the Grizzlies. So they got it from the Grizzlies, and like they drafted Darko. Like they were playing with house money. That's why the Darko pick doesn't even really hurt them, because people forget after they drafted Darko, they still traded for Rasheed Wallace. So they didn't really lose anything. Like, yeah, it'd be cool if they had Carmelo Anthony or Chris Bosh or whoever else, Dwayne Wade, sure. But it's like they wanted someone they could develop, and hindsight is 2020. But nearly every team would have picked Darko there. That's the thing. Nearly every team would have picked Darko.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And moving on to the Western Conference, obviously Warriors are 37-8, and actually on Friday they'll play the Atlanta Hawks. What have you seen from the Warriors this season?
Trust. I think they trust each other more. And I'm not going to say that's all Steve Kerr, but a lot of it is because he got them to all to like with buttonholes, you got them all to buy in. Like, hey, we're not going to be running isos for Klay Thompson in the post down the stretch anymore. We're going to run a system for 48 minutes. If you don't like the system, that's too bad. You're still going to get shots. And we're going to trust Steph Curry, and we're going to trust Klay Thompson, who they put more on Klay Thompson's plate now. And that's actually the impressive part is Klay Thompson got more heaped onto his plate this year than he ever has ever before, and he's responding very well. And hopefully he keeps it up the whole year for their sake. So, and the other thing is Draymond Green took the next step because now he's playing as a small ball four. And he started off the year great from three. I think he's down to like 34%, 35% now. So he's kind of regressed to the mean and all that stuff. But their ability to space you out and then have the two, like, the fact that they have Steph Curry makes it amazing. It's almost unfair. Because he and Damian Lillard, when they come down the court, it's not like, okay, guys, get into the set. It's okay, I'm going to see what's there, and then we're going to get into the set. Either I'm heaving from 30 feet and nailing it, or we're just going to run whatever set to get someone to look. They're scary. Their defense is scary. I remember seeing, I can't remember who posted on Twitter, but I saw a stat that said, which actually blew my mind, Golden State from day one of the season has led the NBA in defensive efficiency every single day.
Wow.
Yeah, you wouldn't think it. I mean, because they're a great defensive team, but that's ridiculous because they play a very fast pace.
Yeah, I mean, and then you compare that to where they used to be, and now seeing that stat about their defense, that's just incredible.
Elite offense and elite defense. I think they're number one in net rating. Atlanta's like number two. I think the Clippers might be number three. So those are like your top three. And it's like you get the Warriors at home, nearly unbeatable. I mean, practically are unbeatable. I think what are they? Only one loss at home. I think it's San Antonio that beat them. Oh,
Yeah.
22-2 at home. I don't remember who beat them the second time, but yeah, like San Antonio beat them the first time, and it was like a shocker because it was San Antonio came in on a back-to-back and beat them. And then who was the second one? Chicago in overtime, I think, right?
I'll double check that, but yeah, I believe you're right.
I think it was Chicago in overtime, and it was like, wow, like this is crazy. Golden State, man, you get them at home, that's a tough place to play. Very tough to win there just because of the crowd. They do get, I mean, the nature of sports, you get more calls at home than you do on the road. So they're going to get away with a little bit more contact defensively, but that doesn't take anything away from their defense. It's still ridiculous. And they still got Curry. They still got Klay Thompson, who is now handling the ball and scoring a little bit more. Harrison Barnes is hitting threes. Draymond Green can step out and hit threes. He can guard 1 to 4, sometimes even a 5, depending on who it is. Bogut, when healthy, alters their defense a lot. Top 3 rim protector. So great passing big. Great finisher with either hand around the basket. It's just they just got to stay healthy. Golden State's issue is health. If they stay healthy, they'll be there. And the other thing that people don't talk about with them is I know people love to bash Andre Iguodala because offensively he's not what he was, but defensively he helps them a lot when he's off the bench because now they're blitzing guys with a Curry, Thompson, Iguodala, Green lineup, and they're guarding 1 to 4, 1 to 5, and they're just blitzing teams with turnovers and running in transition. It's hard to stop that. I mean, when you get guys who aren't used to handling that kind of ball pressure, for long stretches, it gets you. It gets you over a game.
Yeah, and you mentioned Steve Kerr getting people to buy in. I mean, you have David Lee and Andre Iguodala coming off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, other teams don't really have that, I mean, they signed Iguodala to that deal, but people forget they tanked. Well, I shouldn't say tanked, but in a way they did. They tanked their way to keep their pick that year, and they got Harrison Barnes, who now is their starting small forward. So now the contract they gave Iguodala, they can put him on the bench and bring him off the bench there. So it's kind of they built a lot of the way that teams wish they could through the draft. Curry, Thompson, Barnes, all through the draft. Bogut was a buy low candidate with Monta Ellis in a trade. They got rid of Ellis to Milwaukee, and they got Bogut back, and it was like, hey, if Bogut stays healthy, guy's a difference maker. Well, now he's healthy. I mean, well, not all the way healthy, but he stays healthy sometimes, which is more than he was in other places. So, I mean, it's a scary group. It's an honest-to-God scary group when it comes when they get going, when they're clicking. I don't care who they're facing. They're beating that team by 20 at least. It doesn't matter who they're playing. Like for instance, when they play Atlanta, I think it's tomorrow, right, or is it Friday?
Friday.
Okay, when they play Atlanta on Friday, if the Warriors come out clicking, it's over. Like the Hawks will run their system and try to get back in it. But if Golden State gets up by at least 15 in the first half, it's done. Because they're going to suffocate you defensively. They're going to get out and run off your turnovers. And what was a 7-point lead turned to 20 in about a minute and a half, and you're just sitting there going, what the hell happened? I mean, they did it to Sacramento last night. I remember I was watching the game. It was like a 5-point game, and all of a sudden, within like a minute and a half, it was up to 15, and you're like, Jesus, man. Like, it's what they do. they're almost in a way they're almost like a python. They they wrap themselves around you, and you're like, oh, this isn't so bad right now. Or a boa constrictor, not a python. They wrap themselves around you, and then you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. And a minute later, you're crushed, and that's how it is.
Yeah, you mentioned their games against Sacramento. I mean, the one that stands out to me the most is even just a week and a half ago. Kings were fighting with them in the third quarter. Game was near tied up, and then everything clicked. Klay Thompson went from a tie game to being down 30.
Yeah, and I've seen every single Kings Warriors game. Oddly enough, I have watched every single Kings Warriors game, and I remember in every single game, midway through the third quarter, it's been close in every game, and then Golden State just goes, yeah, that's nice. We're gonna show what we are now, and it's like basically the Kings are pedaling a big wheel, and the Warriors go in the F1 Formula One racing car and just zoom off. It's like see you later.
Yep. All right. So speaking, actually, I want to go back. You mentioned that Washington could be a good competition against Atlanta. Who do you think in the West? I mean, obviously you said if Warriors are clicking, no one's beating them. If in a 7-game playoff series, who do you think has the best chance to defeat them?
Well, that's the thing with the West. Everyone always talks about like so and so isn't a contender, so and so is a contender. The Western Conference playoffs are entirely matchup driven. It's all matchups. If you get the wrong, like for instance, like to be honest, at least 3 teams that lose in the first round are going to be teams that were like, oh man, any other year that's a Western Conference finalist or maybe even an NBA finalist. This year it's not. It's almost like the Hunger Games. Teams are just going to die. It's gonna suck. I mean, take the Spurs for instance. They could lose in the first round. You'd be like, defending champion just lost in the first round. Any other year, they played great. Any other year, that's a Western Conference finalist. And it's like, but with Golden State though, Memphis presents them problems. Any series with the Clippers is just going to be one of those like, just it's 7 games of death with the Clippers because they've played each other like 20-something times in the last 2 years, if you count the playoffs. And it's like those teams, like they know each other so well. I think let's see, it's 15 times because they played 4 each year, and then 7 in the playoffs. So 15 times the last 2 years, you kind of know each other well enough to know what the other team's going to do. Same thing with Memphis and the Clippers. Like that's another one. It's like they've seen each other a ton. But with Golden State, it's like Memphis could present problems. Houston, if healthy, matches up pretty well with them because Beverly can kind of guard Curry, Ariza can guard Thompson. Harden you can kind of leave him on Harrison Barnes if you want. Terrence Jones and Mota Eunice can handle down low against Draymond Green defensively. Even Terrence Jones is actually the perfect defender for Draymond Green because he can handle him down low and outside. And then Dwight Howard and Bogut, And so Houston and Golden State match up pretty well. If I had to put the one matchup that I think Golden State could lose on, it would probably would be Memphis because of Memphis's interior scoring. I don't like Draymond Green can match up with Zach Randolph, but I don't think Andrew Bogut will like coming out guarding Marc Gasol. Like that's the one thing. Like Bogut moves his feet well in pick and roll defense, but guarding him big outside, like guarding Marc Gasol outside the paint, is kind of like damaging to the Golden State defense. So we'll see. Golden State is probably the favorite in the West, and rightfully so. I mean, you always hear Charles Barkley jump shooting teams. I don't like jump shooting teams in the playoffs. Well, you got to make jumpers in the NBA. You can't just live in the paint. So Golden State, man, I don't think a lot of Western Conference teams are going to be tripping over themselves to play them. So. Because they're physical. They're also physical. They're one of those finesse teams that's also physical. And that's rare. So it'll be interesting.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Spurs. I mean, one thing that just continue to have an appreciation for him is Tim Duncan, who, I mean, he's like 38 years old, and he's still playing like he's in his 20s. It's in a different way, but it's just incredible.
I'm pretty sure when, like 30 years from now, we'll find out he's a cyborg. Like all that happened was like like the titanium just started to like just rust just a little bit, which is why he looks slower. So I think that's what's going to happen. But honestly, he's been unbelievable, unbelievable. The guy who is there throughout all the injuries this year. Think about it. They lost Thiago Splitter for a while. They lost Kawhi Leonard. Tony Parker missed time. Manu Ginobili's been eh. There's Tim Duncan right in the middle of everything, being the one guy they could depend on.
Yeah, although I will say Tim Duncan does kind of go against Spurs' philosophy or motto of "we miss time" because they're all missing games.
Yeah, and I think you'll start seeing him get rested down the stretch a little bit. They'll start resting him just a little bit because you got to keep him somewhat fresh for the playoffs. And they did it last year. Now, obviously, they were better than they last year than they are this year, but a lot of it's also because of injuries they sustained this year. Like the Kawhi Leonard injury really killed them. So, but now he's back, and he makes the difference. And he's one of the guys I would probably say would probably be in the top 10 for Defensive Player of the Year voting. Kawhi Leonard, that is. Duncan would be top 5. So I don't know who I picked to win, but Duncan would be top 5 just because of the difference he's made so far this year.
Now, the number one team I have to ask you about, because you obviously follow them the most, is your Los Angeles Clippers. I mean, it's been a little bit of an odd season. I mean, obviously they beat the Spurs when they weren't expected to, but then they hit some rough patches. What has been your thoughts on the Clipper season so far, and what could they do to improve at the trade deadline?
On their season, it was actually funny because on Clips Nation yesterday, people gave their grades for the year already. Some people were like, "Oh, C+, B minus, etc." There was a couple of us, and I was one of them, where I said they're towing that B plus A minus line. Like I think that what happened was, I think their expectation level was so high that pundits before the year said this is the team to win the West, and they got the expectations heaped on them, and I think people expected them just to come out and be like, okay, we're the best team in the West, we're going to rattle off 10 straight wins to start the year, we're going to show everybody who's boss, and they didn't, and I think people really freaked out about it. But people didn't realize they're still trying to adjust. Like this second year under Doc Rivers, they're trying to adjust. Like they were without Chris Paul for like 40 games last year, same thing with Redick. Like they missed guys for vast stretches of time. It's not a great year. So I think people just assumed that those guys are coming back. Now this is a 60-win team. It doesn't work like that. Their schedule last year was very favorable for them. This year it's not so favorable. They had 4 games in 5 nights in 4 different time zones. Now, that's almost unheard of. The Grammy trip that they're on is spanning like I think 6,000, 7,000 miles or something like that in 13 days. Like they're playing 8 games in like 13 days. They have 3 back-to-backs. Like they have 4 games in like their back-to-backs on the Grammy trip this year are New Orleans and San Antonio, which they already played. Then they go Cleveland, Toronto, Oklahoma City, Dallas. Like and the final 4 are a 4 and 5 night stretch. So in 4 and 5 nights you're going Cleveland, Toronto, Oklahoma City, Dallas, and the Oklahoma City game, which comes after a day off, is an afternoon game. So they don't even get any rest. It's ridiculous. So they're basically playing 4 games about 4.5 days, and they're trying to like their record now is what it was I believe last year at this time. So after the same amount of games, and I think people are just worried that they're not showing the next gear. But it's like they've beaten Golden State in LA. They beat the Spurs in San Antonio. They blew the first Spurs game. They had the first Spurs game won until they had the collapse. They collapsed against Brooklyn. They didn't look great against New Orleans. New Orleans, and it happens. The Clippers have some bad losses. Losses to New Orleans without Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis. They lost to the Bulls without Pau Gasol and Derrick Rose. They lost to the Cavaliers without Kevin Love. Like they have some not bad losses, but losses that you're like, those are games you should win, But it's like they're okay. People bring up their defense, and it's like their starting lineup defensively ranks better than the Memphis and Atlanta starting lineups defensively when it comes to efficiency. Not many people know that, and it's pretty ridiculous. Even with Jamal Crawford, if you take Jamal Crawford and put him in Redick's spot, their defense is better than Memphis' starting lineup and Atlanta's starting lineup. The problem is the bench. It's all the bench, and they're trying to like this new bench they have is playing okay. It's playing better than the old bench did, so they're trying to figure it out. It's getting there. Another issue people have is Spencer Hawes. He's not hitting his threes. He's hitting like I think 33% on threes this year, but it's 43% over the last 10 games. He's still trying to figure it out. He went through an injury. He missed about 10 or so games, I believe. Like it's all a process. It's all a process. The Clippers are fine. They're fine. Like they're gonna make the playoffs. They're gonna be a top 5 seed. And in the West, it's all you need. You just need to get. They might have home court for the first round. I don't know if you need it anymore in the West because it just is what it is. I think if they can get a first round series against Portland or Houston or Dallas, they're gonna win because those teams aren't gonna like the problem the Clippers have had in the playoffs is physical teams that have just worn them down. Like last year, Golden State wore them down for 7 games, and then they played Oklahoma City. They almost definitely should have won Game 5, but they got worn down. They got worn down 2 years before that when they beat Memphis in a grueling 7 games, and they got swept by the Spurs because they were tired and they were injured and all this stuff. And it's like it all comes down to if you're healthy, and that's the Clippers thing. Redick's now out with back spasms indefinitely, and we don't know when he's going to be back. And indefinitely is a scary word because you think like a month. You think about a month because back spasms aren't really a joke. So we'll see. They'll be there. They'll be top 5, top 6 seed. It all depends on matchups. They're fine. They're fine. I can say it 100 times, and I honestly believe it. They're fine.
You know, I must say you're really killing my LA Clippers panic button sales. I'm not very happy about that.
No, a lot of people are panicked because they picked 58, 59, 60 wins. I think I had them at 57, but I even said when I did my preseason preview thing, I remember I like waffled. I flip-flopped back and forth between them and Golden State in the standings because I had Golden State third at like 56 wins, and I almost put Golden State above them. And when I did the playoff matchups, I had the Clippers beating Golden State in the semis and then losing to the Spurs in the Western Conference Finals. But I even said, Clippers Warriors is 7 games of death, and the Warriors can easily win. Like, it's the West, man. It's the West. Like, it's going to sound cliche. It's the Wild Wild West. Anything goes. It's a shootout. The West is no joke.
Because obviously the East, I think, is far easier. So, if we're looking at the NBA champion this year, are we more than likely looking at a West team?
Depends on who, and it depends on who comes out of the East. Because if it's Atlanta, I think Atlanta can beat almost every team in the West. If it's Cleveland, it depends what Cleveland you're getting. If it's Chicago, it depends what Chicago you're getting. It's everything in the playoffs is entirely matchup driven unless your team is just far and away like otherworldly, which Golden State might be. And their issue is health. They got to stay healthy. If Bogut misses games late in the year and he misses the playoffs, anytime in the playoffs, it's killer for them. So we'll see.
Yeah, you mentioned the Clippers Warriors, just how 7-game series, and I mean even last year, I think that was one of the most fun series we saw last year was the Warriors and Clippers just going at it, and I think it took something out of both teams.
Well, it's very interesting because those teams do not like each other, but I think in a way they actually respect each other. Almost like you went through hell with each other, so you'll respect the enemy just because of what they went through with you, And I think they found out something about each team. They found out how mentally strong each team was and how mentally strong certain players were. I mean, I was in LA for each of the 4 home games for the Clippers. I was there at the arena every night for 4 of the 7 games, and you saw up close and personal. Those were teams who did not like each other. They hated each other, literally hated each other. They were going to try to kill each other for that spot. And there's a certain amount of respect that comes out of that. It's almost like 2 old lions fighting for the spot and the pride. And it's almost it's like you respect how much fight the other one has, and that's how it went for them. They don't like each other, but I think they respect each other. They're going to say things that get under each other's nerves just to see what irritates them. But at the end of the day, I think they do respect each other. And
Now,
7 more games of that would be. I don't know who to win another 7 games because people would just say Golden State because of how they've done this year. But you don't Chris Paul, Blake Griffin versus Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Bogut. And then you throw in DeAndre Jordan. It's what happens. You never know because with Clippers and Warriors, it's a case by case study. Warriors blew out the Clippers in Golden State. Clippers blew them out in Los Angeles on Christmas. You never know.
absolutely. Now we were speaking about toughness and just mutual respect between teams and really fighting. These are qualities that the Sacramento Kings do not have. And talking about your preview earlier in the year, before the season, I was really excited. I was like, "Hey, man! I mean, the Kings are 5-1. They're gonna do better than your projection." And then it all crumbled apart after they fired Mike Malone. Which, if that's not the coach you wanted, fine. But the way they went about it, and then seemingly not having a plan afterward, or the plan completely falling apart, it's ugly.
It's something. I don't know if there's a word to describe it, but yeah, it's something. It's something, all right. I mean, they lack something, and I think it's easy to say they lack direction because they don't. I think when they wake up in the morning, they don't know which way the front door is. It's just. I think what has happened with them is they've gotten to the point where they made so many bad moves with like panic moves that I think it almost became like a quicksand situation where it's like you made one move and you realize how bad it was. Now you're going to make another move to try to pull yourself out of it, but then that move just sunk you a little bit lower. It's like the more they're struggling to get out of this rut, the more they're sinking. And that's the problem. And sometimes you just got to go through with it. Sometimes you just got to suck for a while. I mean, I know the Kings have been bad for a while, but sometimes you just got to let it go. Like, just understand what your direction is,
Yeah, you mentioned panic moves. I mean, obviously there are plenty of Kings fans who now want Pete D'Alessandro fired, and I'm not on them. I still believe he can be a good general manager and deserves the job. But the issue I had is the lack of direction, as you mentioned. I mean, fans wanted answers, so he decided to go on the local radio show and answer questions, and it turned into respectfully type of show where he was pounding his chest about the good decisions he made and that the fans just trust him. And that is a terrible look when you have an angry fan base.
Yeah, I remember there was a saying, it was like, as a ruler, would you rather be loved or would you rather be feared? And the answer is neither. You want to be both. And I think with him, it was almost like you can't. There's nothing to love you about, and there's nothing to fear about you. And it's almost like, so you have none of the qualities that we need. And you can't brag about something that you haven't done. I mean, it's just how it is. I would like to think the Kings know what they're doing, because I do like the Kings front office. I do. I think because Vivek is very smart guy. I mean, there was a special on Real Sports about him, about when he came over to America. He came over with $20 in his pocket. I mean, this is a guy who at the same time went to like Harvard and MIT and got degrees. And then he was eating in his dorm every night. He's eating like Lunchables basically. And it was like, next thing you know, this guy's worth a ton of money. Wants an NBA franchise. He hooked onto the Golden State Warriors, and then he got out of the Warriors to own the Kings. And he loves the area. He loves the team. I like him as a person, but the direction of that team is just very. I almost want to say troubling, but it's very perplexing, I guess would be the word, because I don't know where they're going. They have a piece in Cousins. They have Collison, who's been good this year. McLemore has, I don't even know where the hell he found his game, because last year and the beginning of this year it was terrible, and lately he's found it. Rudy Gay somehow became efficient under Mike Malone, and then they fired Mike Malone. Uh, I don't understand their obsession with Jason Thompson. So I mean, they got it's weird pieces, man. Just weird pieces.
Yeah, you mentioned the directional team. I think one issue which I think people are afraid of is Vivek had an idea of modeling what the Warriors did, but the issue is Kings don't really have the pieces for that. And you have a star in DeMarcus Cousins who, thank goodness, is now an NBA All-Star. But you're not building around your star player. You're trying to fit a system and put him into it.
Yeah, I know it's gonna hurt. I know it's gonna pain you to hear. I think they trade DeMarcus Cousins after next year. If they don't have a direction after this draft, and next year doesn't go as well, I think they trade him because he'll have like 2 years left on his deal, and I think they can get a lot for him from a team. I I feel bad for him because Mike Malone was his guy. Mike Malone was his guy. Like the leap DeMarcus Cousins made in terms of attitude, and I'm not going to call it maturity because let's face it, he was 19 years old when he came to the NBA. Not a lot of 19. I mean, I wasn't mature as at all when I was 19. So we're expecting guys 19, 20, 21 years old to be mature, and just now he's becoming mature. Well, not mature, but his attitude's changing, and Mike Malone was a major part of that. And to get rid of him, I think really affected DeMarcus Cousins a lot. And it actually hurt to see. Because even last night, that alley-oop to Maurice Spates, Cousins didn't care. No one cared. And that was the sad part. No one cared. It was like, whatever. I mean, let's face it, you replace Mike Malone, who got guys to try, with Ty Corbin, who hasn't gotten anybody anywhere to try. So, it is what it is.
Yeah, and everything you said is true. I mean, deep down, I think really DeMarcus Cousins being traded is probably eventually going to happen. I mean, frankly, I'm kind of surprised he's been able to deal with this situation this long because there is no direction. Really, he's wasting away what is going to be an incredible career. So, frankly, I would completely understand if he asked for a trade, although I'm sure there would be negative attention that comes from it, even though I think that's complete BS.
Yeah, he would get at the people would just start slinging he's whiny, he's a crybaby, he's a loser, he doesn't know what it takes to win. All the metaphors in the English language would just be thrown at him. It is what it is. I don't think people really understand how much it sucks to lose and how much you want out of a situation until you are repetitively losing. It sucks the life out of you. It is what it is. I mean, for his sake, I hope it turns around there. I hope it turns around there in Sacramento. I don't know if it will. The draft is coming up for them. They got to nail the draft. They need somebody. I liked the Stauskas pick. I liked it. It's just I didn't understand it because they had McLemore, so I thought maybe they're moving McLemore, But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what they do.
You mentioned the draft, and just real quickly, I want to add you mentioned about losing, and obviously going back to high school days, but I played for a high school football team. We had 2 wins in 2 seasons. Just even at that small level, it eats at you, and you start hating practice, you start hating playing, and it just after 5 years of being here for DeMarcus Cousins, you just want out.
Oh yeah, you let's face it. They always say winning is the ultimate cure, right? Losing sucks. Ask anybody, man, anybody anywhere in life. They can remember when they won, but they'll recall their major losses quicker than their major wins. Losing is the worst. It's what was when they asked Pete Carroll? Remember when they asked Pete Carroll after the Super Bowl? Can you describe what you're feeling? And his response was, I don't feel anything. I just don't have a feeling right now. And that's true. You feel empty. You feel numb. Not like you're sick. It's almost like you're trying to come to grips every day with the fact of what just happened. It's just it's you see the shots of the guys on the bench. You see the shots of the guys on the bench at the end of a tough loss or at the end of a blowout, and they're kind of blankly staring off into the distance. Because they're trying to. Now, I can't speak from, because I've never obviously played in the NBA, but it's like you can just almost see like they're staring off in the distance, like trying to come to terms with what just happened, and it sucks. Losing sucks. People think like, oh, they're professional athletes, they get paid to play, they should suck it up and move on. Losing sucks. I don't care who you can pay me $100 million a day, and if I lost, it would suck.
And you know what? Because I do want to talk about your draft board and talk about where the Kings can improve immediately after this. But I mean, if I'm getting paid $100 million, still, honestly, if I'm a fan, and if losing doesn't bother a player, then I have a huge issue with his competitive spirit and his will to win.
I would rather have a guy who hates to lose than a guy who loves to win.
Absolutely.
Because I know the guy who hates to lose is going to work harder than the guy who loves to win.
Couldn't have said it better. So let's talk about losing, and we've actually been doing this. This is going to be the longest podcast I've done. So
it's all right. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I love it.
And we haven't even gotten around to Defensive Player of the Year.
Absolutely. What can the Kings do in the draft? Because fortunately, it looks like they'll actually keep their pick. What can they do to improve this team? And looking at your draft board.
I think right now they're like 8th or 9th. They're like in a tie for 8th or something like that. Hold on, let me look real quick. Yeah, they're in a tie for 8th with Boston, but they're tied in the loss column with Denver and Detroit, and they're 1 and 2 back in the loss column of Utah and Indiana, so they could finish like 6th, But looking at what they need, they have Darren Collison. I don't think they need a point guard. Their shooting guard situation looks okay with Ben McLemore. Rudy Gay's there at the 3. They just gave him that little extension. Cousins, you're obviously not going to draft a guy to replace him. But one of my biggest pet peeves is teams drafting for need. Teams do it all the time, and I hate it. I really do. It bothers me more than anything. At that point, if you're in the top 10 or even in the lottery, at actually any point in the first round, unless there's like a guy on your board that you're like, I need to have that guy because we need someone like that, draft the best player available, regardless of position, regardless of need, because they'll find a way to fit. For the Kings, that point of the draft, it's hard to say because a guy I like is D'Angelo Russell, but he might not be there for them. Another guy like Miles Turner could play next to DeMarcus Cousins. Kelly Oubre is good. Stanley Johnson's good. I have a cat next to me now. But yeah, it depends. It depends on what they want. It depends if they want a power forward. If they want a power forward, Karl Anthony Towns. If they want to go international, Kristaps Porzingis, offensive-minded four-man. It's one of those situations where they're in the unenviable spot of they're at the whim and mercy of every other team ahead of them, and that's the problem for them. Is if they had the first pick, I know I'm going to catch some slack for this because people think Jahlil Okafor should go first. I wouldn't take him first overall, but if it was my pick with the Kings, with the first pick I could have any player on that board, I think I would actually go D'Angelo Russell. I think I would go him or Stanley Johnson. Him or Stanley Johnson would probably be my first two choices for that team.
Now, for those who haven't been following, because I haven't been getting to NBA draft a lot yet, what can you tell about D'Angelo Russell in the scouting report?
This is almost like cheating because there's no two players are alike. Everyone's different, and it's cheating because I'm going to say reminds me a lot of James Harden, but he does. He reminds me a lot of James Harden. 6'5", not as physical in stature as Harden, but every bit as the athlete as Harden was, which Harden wasn't an amazing athlete, but he was a good athlete. He was a better athlete than you thought he was. And left-hand dominant, great passer, great vision, very willing and capable rebounder. He doesn't mind going in the paint and getting dirty for rebounds with big men. Good defender, very good shooter, good slasher, he's just a great all-around prospect. And I was very, wishy-washy with him when I first saw him. But the more I watch him, the more he wins me over. He really wins me over as an all-around playmaker, do-it-all, shooting guard. Really does remind me of Harden.
That's good to hear.
Now, I'm not going to say he is going to be James Harden because there's only one James Harden, but he reminds me a lot of James Harden.
Just obviously do want to wrap this up soon, but so I do want to talk about Defensive Player of the Year, MVP, Coach of the Year, and Most Improved Player. Who would be your picks?
Defensive Player of the Year is tough. I have a top five. Be Duncan, Tim Duncan, Andrew Bogut, Draymond Green, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist would be my top five. If you look at Charlotte's defense with and without him, it's night and day. There's something like 94 points per 100 possessions with him on the floor defensively, and like 104 without him. It's insane. Yeah. And probably, I would actually, it's a little bit of a shocker because I know people are expecting me to say DeAndre Jordan, but actually my fifth spot would probably go to Rudy Gobert. Because Utah's like 101.5 with him and like 110 without him. Like, they're bad without him. But with him, they're good. So, and he makes a difference. He's the best rim protector in basketball. So, I think that, I mean, if he was on a better team, if Utah was better, I think he would get Defensive Player of the Year votes. But if I had to pick a winner, I'd probably go. I want to go Bogut, but he's missed a lot of time. So I'll probably go with Duncan for now. Tim Duncan, I'll say Defensive Player of the Year now.
I love that pick. What about MVP?
It's a two-man race between Curry and Harden. I'll go Harden. I think Harden's had to do more with less. Like, I understand Bogut's missed time, but Howard's missed a lot of time too. And now he's going to miss like the next month. There was talk of microfracture surgery. That's bad. Yeah. I don't think he has it, but there was talk about it. Terrence Jones missed time. Patrick Beverly missed time. Harden is basically keeping that team afloat by himself. So, because if you look at the game, when James Harden doesn't play well, they're bad. When he plays, he's averaging 30 points a game, they're great. So he'd be my MVP choice. Curry would be second, and it's like those two, and then large gap everybody else.
I like it. All right, so Justin, as we wrap up, where can people follow you on Twitter and find your work?
On Twitter, it would be at FlyByNight, FlyByknite. You can find my work at you can either find it at clipsnation.com or butthegameison.com/thebeat. You can find me there. If you go on my Twitter profile, you'll see both links to each site. I should have a new article for the Beat pretty soon. I pretty much write about anything. It was going to either be about the WWE or what I was planning on doing is I told the guy who also who does the site, Mark Travis. You can follow him at Mark_Travis on Twitter. I was telling him I was probably going to, because I did the NBA at the quarter poll, 25% of the season's gone. I was going to do it at the midway point, which came about, I want to say like a week and a half ago, I believe, was the midway point of the year. But I'll probably do it at the All-Star break. I'll probably write a profile for each team and what I've seen. I mean, it's been a long year for the NBA. The All-Star game is right around the corner. Some guys shouldn't even make it, and other guys got left off. Damian Lillard got left off, but that's the nature of the business, I guess.
Yeah, the All-Star game, I mean, I like that fans have votes, but at the same time, if the voting ability of fans was to somehow disappear, I wouldn't be that bothered.
It's funny. I don't think the fan voting will ever go away. I think it's just because it's a way to keep them interacted and it's a way to keep them important. Like they feel like they have a voice. I mean, to be honest, I'm over the All-Star game. I don't mind if it's kind of pointless now. Like you're just hoping that your player doesn't get injured.
Yeah. Like
when they're on the court, you're just like, please don't get injured. I don't need to see you blow something out today. Just like the skills challenges, they're cool, but I hate them. Like the only one I find mildly interesting is the three-point contest. I don't even like the dunk contest anymore.
So are you telling me you're not excited about the Stephen Curry, Victor Oladipo horse contest? I can't believe it.
I don't even know why it's the fact there's a horse contest in itself shows you how sad it is. It really does. It shows you how depressing it is. We don't need a horse contest. 3-point shooting contest, slam dunk contest, all-star game. The rookie sophomore game is whatever. It's cool to actually. It's actually interesting. I'd rather watch the rookie sophomore game than the all-star game.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
And one last question. Obviously, love having you on. I'll be sure to link your big board draft and your Twitter account
All
on the
right.
YouTube page. Looking at the rookie sophomore game, I just have one question. How did Contavious Caldwell-Pope make it in over Ben McLemore?
Uh, I think team. And plus, you got to remember they revamped the strategy this year to USA versus World.
Yeah.
So I feel like it came down to those two, and I think they just went, well, Contavious has been great ever since the Pistons got rid of Josh Smith. Well, let's just go with him. Because he has been good. It's just, I just feel like it's one of those things where it's like you could have went either or, and it's whatever. It is what it is.
Speaking of Josh Smith, the Josh Smith fans account followed me on Twitter, so I figure if I block him, I'm probably going to win the lottery or something tomorrow, so I'm really excited.
There is not a player in the NBA I loathe more than Josh Smith. I don't like a lot of the players and how they play, but Josh Smith is probably the worst.
I didn't even know he had fans.
Yeah, that was news to me too. I had
I,
someone actually tell me a couple weeks ago that he would be the difference maker for a championship, and my response was, yeah, for the team they're playing.
well, I mean, to be fair, I'm pretty sure he could be a difference maker for like a high school or a Pee Wee championship.
He probably could help Kentucky this year.
There you go. I want to thank you so much for coming on. I mean, we had an hour of basketball talk, and really, I haven't done that all year, so this was amazing. Thank you.
No problem, man. We're going to have to do it again.
Absolutely. And you know what? Even later in the offseason, we could talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to talk about that. Can't wait.
Ab-
I got so many thoughts about that. I'll just leave that for another time.
Can't wait.
All right, dude.
Thank you so much.